which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Kathy, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the August 16th issue of the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Architecture. Woven into the Land, a Cathedral of Solace by Michael Kimmelman, Medora, North Dakota. You'd be hard-pressed not to like the new $450 million Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library. It's an easy charmer and a spectacular work of ecologically minded architecture in the drop-dead gorgeous North Dakota Badlands. The firm Snøhetta in New York designed it. The building is 93,000 square feet of massed timber and rammed earth, a huge hobbit house hugging the precipice of a grassy butte overlooking the tiny town of Medora, North Dakota. Theodore Roosevelt National Park is 5 minutes away. Presidential libraries are all the rage, if you hadn't noticed. The podcasters on Deason Weekly joked that they're arriving like buses now. You wait for one, and 3 of them come back at the same time. Barack Obama's $850 million presidential center opened in June on the south side of Chicago, in a glowering granite tower housing a museum, but with no actual library of presidential records. Obama's records are stored with the National Archives in Maryland, and his papers are in the process of being digitized. President Trump has announced plans for a library that he imagines as a skyscraper in downtown Miami containing a Trump-themed museum and luxury hotel, but no library either. Now along comes Roosevelt's Museum, backed by a national nonprofit connected to the National Archives and Records Administration. It's a presidential library in name only because Theodore Roosevelt's physical papers were scattered before presidential libraries even existed. Franklin D. Roosevelt established the first one in the early 1940s, giving his archives to the nation as a gift and building a modest home for them on his estate in the Hudson Valley. The idea was to serve public history and scholarship. Over time, the institution has morphed into more of an architectural show pony, shrine and museum, lionizing chief executive-size egos. It helps that Theodore Roosevelt has been dead since 1919. The library in Medora had no ego to stroke. Why Medora? In 1884, grieving his wife and mother, who died hours apart on Valentine's Day, Roosevelt boarded a train out of New York for the Little Missouri Valley. He left behind his newborn daughter and debarked below the butte to hunt, ranch, and build himself a log cabin that's at the entrance to the park. The solace he found there inspired him as president to conserve millions of acres of American wilderness and occasionally displaced Native Americans who lived on those acres, creating public monuments, preserves, and forests. The Roosevelt Library Foundation picked Snøhetta among the architectural practices competing for the job because of how it translated Roosevelt's conservationist legacy into a building that blends gracefully into the Badlands. Craig Dykers runs Snøhetta's New York office. Camping on the butte for inspiration, he came upon a pair of stones under a leaf. What resulted was a plan that splits the library into 2 pavilions, one housing a museum and restaurant, the other an auditorium, offices, and classrooms. The 2 pavilions share a walkable roof. Walkable roofs have been Snøhetta's signature move since the firm made its bones in the architecture world a couple of decades ago, designing the Oslo Opera House. The Roosevelt roof is big enough to park a pair of 747s. From some angles, it can put you in mind of Eero Saarinen's well-shaped skating rink at Yale, but its sod floor and planted beds of prairie grasses also suggest earth lodges that tribal nations built across the Great Plains. The roof's curves and steel outcroppings for skylights make the building nearly disappear in a landscape of hills and hoodoos. Up on the butte, the library sits to one side, seating center stage to an expansive green about the size of an NFL stadium, ringed by a boardwalk. Dykers and his colleagues started collecting and cataloging seeds of local genetic origin to plant on the butte and on the roof before construction began. The Native Plant Project, as it is called, enlists volunteers at North Dakota State University to grow plugs and makes the library a showcase petri dish for regenerative ecologies extinguished across the Great Plains by monocropping and overgrazing. The rammed earth walls inside the library arise from a similar aspiration, resurfacing a resilient pre-industrial construction method shared by European settlers and native peoples. They could hardly make a more convincing and eye-popping case for the technology's renaissance. Towering, muscular, tactile, and thick, with wavy, striated bands of colored soil, they're like modernist abstractions echoing the geology of the Badlands. Landscape restoration and climate resilience weren't on Trump's agenda when he trekked to North Dakota and cut the ribbon on the library in July. He was joined by Douglas Burgum, his Interior Secretary, who championed the project while he was North Dakota's governor and praised the president profusely in Medora. Trump lauded Roosevelt for being a he-man who built the Panama Canal, which Trump now wants back. He called the library a new national treasure, but he sidestepped conservation. Last month, the White House reversed decades of federal protections and opened habitats of endangered species to drilling, mining, and real estate development. It shrank national monuments in Utah and has siphoned National Park Service funds to subsidize the president's building projects in the capital. Western North Dakota is Trump country, as Sean McCreish reported in the New York Times while observing the president on his trip. The crowd in Medora cheered the president and celebrated the library's opening. But I spoke with locals who worry about its impact. A 2024 census put Medora's population at 160. Real estate prices are rising and new houses are going up in the hills, in part, I was told, because the library is expected to entice more tourists to make the Great American Road Trip to Yellowstone, Mount Rushmore, and Roosevelt Park. Ed O'Keefe, the library's chief executive, said he was hoping that 280,000 people a year would visit. Its museum may be as close as we can get today to presidential retrospection. The Roosevelt Foundation organized a board of independent scholars to vet the content. The library consulted with the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation on the architecture and exhibition, which lionizes Roosevelt but also calls him out on his imperialism and racism, and dives into his troubled relations with Native peoples. I leave it to Roosevelt's experts to assess the particulars, but the exhibition is a multimedia extravaganza and hugely clever romp. The statue of Roosevelt on horseback, towering over an African man and a Native American man, moved from outside the American Museum of Natural History in New York into the library's storage, is nowhere to be seen. An artificial intelligence hologram of Roosevelt, designed by Microsoft, steals the show. Trump toured the exhibition and asked the hologram if Roosevelt considered his greatest achievement to be the Panama Canal. The canal stands as one of my proudest battles, no question, but greatness is a strange thing, AI Teddy responded. I measure my greatest work for the lives improved, parks set aside, food and drugs made safe, the square deal given to all, not just to a few. As I said, clever. Visitors move between the museum and the boardwalk I mentioned earlier, a slender, compressed ashwood ribbon woven into the butte's undulating plateau, connecting to a snaking path zigzagging across the roof. Benches, trellises, outlooks, and bleachers let visitors pause and take in the views. There's a rope trampoline over a precipice to tempt children and give parents heart attacks. I spotted a pronghorn eating wildflowers and saw muddy animal tracks on the roof. Then I settled into one of Snøhetta's rocking chairs on the veranda at the end of a soaring breezeway between the timber pavilions. Roosevelt's cabin was off in the distance. The Badlands stretched under wispy clouds toward infinity. I tried to imagine what the young Roosevelt must have felt 1,000,000 miles away from all the noise and the political arena, listening to the wind. It was bliss. Popcast. Beats, Blink, and a Rocker's Rebirth. Travis Barker survived a plane crash, married a Kardashian, and drummed through it all. By John Caramanica and Joe Cosciarelli. The drummer Travis Barker is a pop-punk star who's also been an in-demand hip-hop collaborator and go-to anchor for an award show extravaganza. A bashful, relatively low-profile celebrity who married into reality TV's royal family. A former hard-living rocker who has matured into a life of long runs, breath work, and parenting a blended brood of 7. The one constant throughout a career of multi-platinum albums, near tragedy, and a streetwear line has been percussion. Barker is one of the signature drummers of the modern era, a ferocious pounder with a versatile ear. Trained in jazz and marching bands during his teenage skater years in Fontana, California, he's brought that skilled dynamism to bands across multiple genres: ska, country, and of course the generational pop-punk heroes Blink-182 and the rap-rock outfit Transplants. He even played a little soca before becoming famous. A Barker fill is immediately recognizable, and over a 3-decade career, he's generally preferred speaking through the kit, loudly, quickly, and with maximum physical force. "I think scars are cool," Barker said recently in an interview on Popcast, the New York Times pop culture chat show. "I've never left a show where I'm a bloody mess or my hands are a mess and been like, I wish I didn't play the way I did, or I wish I would have went not as hard tonight." But in middle age, Barker, 50, is finding other ways to share what he's been through. Last week, Hulu released the documentary Travis Barker, Louder Than Fear, a decade-in-the-making biography, from his strict upbringing and the rebellion it inspired to the highs of MTV fame with Blink, through the aftermath of the 2008 plane crash that killed 4 of the 6 people on board, including some of his closest friends. Barker barely survived and underwent years of physical and psychological recovery in the years since. Ending on a note of rebirth, including his marriage to Kourtney Kardashian and first flight in nearly 20 years, the documentary is an uncommonly intimate and engagingly direct look at a celebrity who has rarely welcomed close scrutiny, but found himself under microscopes all the same. In conversation with Popcast's John Caramanica and Joe Cosciarelli, Barker spoke about drumming as discipline, remaining just to the side of the spotlight around his famous bandmates and family members, which parts of his life he's willing to surrender to the cameras, and the life changes he's chosen to make over the years in order to protect his devotion to music. "That's why I train, and that's why I run, and that's why I box, and that is why I do the things I do," Barker said, "because I want to be able to play the way I want to play." Joe Cosciarelli: "When did you decide to make this film, and why? There's very intense footage from your plane crash, your 20-plus surgeries afterward, your recovery and sobriety journey, intimate moments with your family." Travis Barker: "After my book, Can I Say, Living Large, Cheating, Death, and Drums, 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 2015, the conversations started. The book, the wounds were so fresh, that was really difficult. But both the book and the film are therapeutic, right?" You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. It was maybe like 2017, the documentary was supposed to be done. And the directors and the producer, their goal for the end was, can you please go to an airport and we end there? They just wanted to have me walk on a plane, maybe insinuating maybe one day I'll fly again. And I was like, absolutely not. There's no way I'm going near a plane. At that time, I wouldn't even stay at hotels near airports. I didn't go to an airport for almost 20 years. I was like, just put this out one day when I'm gone, whatever. I don't want to deal with it anymore. So it just sat there stagnant. Next thing you know, I fall in love, get into this relationship, just self-work, doing breath work. Very long story short, I fly again. Kosharelli. You're alluding to this, but the other thing that happened in between 2017 and 2026 is you married into the reality TV family. You're on the Kardashians now. I assume learning to share more about your personal life in that format. How did that prepare you to tell the end of that story in this film? Barker. I kind of didn't even realize I'm on the show. I think the best way for me to deal with stuff like that or to be a part of things like that is to not really acknowledge that I'm being filmed or anything different is happening. I love my wife and her family and the girls and everyone. And sometimes she's filming and I'm there, but I never even approve episodes or watch them. Karamonica. Really? You don't do any approvals? Barker. Nah, I'm not on the show as a main character where I have interviews. I'm an accessory. But the show wasn't really a learning curve to opening up. What helped me release the documentary was being able to overcome the big things that had power over me. Karamonica. I was really struck by how your children spoke in the film about fear, trauma, and anxiety related to flying. When you finally said, me and Courtney are going to get on the plane and go on this trip, your children were saying, please don't. I wonder if you can talk about your conversations with them to get them comfortable with where you were. Barker. Well, my journey getting there was I had this massage therapist, and I remember her telling me, you gotta do breath work. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, you have so much trauma, I can feel it in your body. I didn't know exactly how to navigate after my accident. Talked to a post-traumatic doctor, got sober, would run, would exercise, do all the stuff that I just felt was calling me in. A fan that was really, really cool and very persistent would always reach out to me and be like, hey, do breath work. But the guy, he looked like me. He had tattoos on his head, and I was like, man, I feel so weird. I don't know this person. I'm going to be very closed off. Dude, 10 minutes into it, I'm bawling my eyes out. I'm like a mess. And it's like that the next 5 sessions. But I also feel like I'm making progress, you know? I just felt different. So ultimately, that led to me telling my wife, if you're ever going to take me anywhere, don't tell me about it. Just tell me the night before. So she did. I did breath work the night before, ended up flying. Luckily, I had a great experience. But my kids were very, very protective of me and very scared, to the point where they were begging me not to go on the plane. So I had to show them to break the cycle to where they would try. Unfortunately, my kids were around 3 and 5 when my accident happened, and they never flew after that. It's sad, but they were basically brought up to think that's how people die. Kosharelli. In the climax of the documentary, as they're going through the story of your crash, you're essentially doing an interpretive drum solo set to the most horrible thing that's ever happened in your life. How was that directed? Barker. The producer of the film said, hey, there's this scene in the film where we're going to go to some of the footage of your plane crash, and I want you to do a drum solo that kind of mirrors that feeling. I showed up to this warehouse that's lit, and there's fire everywhere. And I didn't say much, honestly. I just got behind the kit and started talking. Kosharelli. With your hands and your feet. When you were done, did you feel like you had released something? Barker. Yeah. It's so raw, it's so cathartic and intense. I think I did 2 solos, which were just completely off the dome, just improv. You know, when you see an MMA fight and they know they knocked him out, they don't even need to watch him fall, they just walk off. I just did a walk off. I was like, I know that's it. That was hard, harder than I communicated. But I just thought the best thing was to just put the energy through the drums. Kosharelli. Your fertility journey with your wife Courtney is documented on the Kardashians, but not entirely. In Louder Than Fear, you two share the harrowing story of a miscarriage that she had before you had your son Rocky, who's now 2. How did you guys decide that this was the right forum to share that part of your journey together? Barker. I think when there's things that can benefit people or help people relate to something, that's always a green light. She's always trying to do something like that. So our journey of miscarriages and then IVF, which failed, resulting in us having a baby naturally, I feel like that's a story that so many people can relate to. Karamonica. Your older kids, especially Landon and Alabama, are very popular online. You have this history in reality television and being a star yourself. How do you communicate with them about navigating that part of growing up? Barker. It's so hard. I mean, my son called me the other day and he's like, hey, they offered me to go on The Voice. And I was like, dude, you're way too cool for that. I have to tell him, because you could think I'm contradicting myself because you've seen me play drums on American Idol with Mary J. Blige. Whatever, I'm different. You got to think about your idols. If your idol's Kurt Cobain, would Kurt Cobain do The Voice? Karamonica. Do you feel protective over how they present themselves on the internet? Every now and then you see one of them get into some kind of scrap online. Barker. I lead by example. I used to almost get in fights with paparazzi. I'm not proud of any of that stuff. I used to have a temper when it came to people following us or just dumb stuff. I might be quick to react or be confrontational. But I'm like, that ain't it, babe. It's just all noise. Stay running in the direction you're running in. Dance. At 75, still putting the best point forward. A trip through Juilliard's archives show how its history reflects the arc of dance in the 20th century. By Marina Hars. In the fall of 1951, the Juilliard School of Music, then located on Claremont Avenue and 122nd Street, opened its doors to its inaugural class of aspiring dancers. The implication was clear, that dance was a serious pursuit deserving of professional training and a diploma, just like music, and that a shared space for both would benefit musicians as well as dancers. Dancers would be closer to music and get a better education in music, and the musicians would learn something about dance. The composer William Schumann, then the president of Juilliard, later said about his decision to invite dance into the cloistered world of classical music. This fall, the dance department, now called the Dance Division, celebrates its 75th anniversary. The anniversary is an opportunity to look back and consider what a dance education can be. Damien Wotzel, Juilliard's president since 2018, said in a recent video call, "It's about learning how to learn." A perusal of the archives shows how rich the dance division's history has been, with a roster of teachers and students that reflects the arc of American dance in the 20th century. And the curriculum, a mix of ballet and modern dance, once seen as eccentric, now is the norm. The dance holdings on the 5th floor of Juilliard's Lincoln Center headquarters are the largest of the school's collections, in part because the department's founder, Martha Hill, was very much an archivist, said Jane Gottlieb, director of Juilliard's library. She kept every scrap of paper. Jenny Damus Farah, director of the archives, opened box after box after box containing photographs, scrapbooks, and memos. In the early 20th century, modern dance had defined itself in opposition to ballet. But Hill was convinced that it was time for the two disciplines to make peace and begin learning from each other. Hill's biographer, Janet Mansfield Soros, wrote that this combined training became Hill's mantra for developing the complete dancer. The goal is to create dancers and future choreographers and directors who understand movement, independent of style, and can work anywhere. Risa Steinberg, a former Juilliard student who danced for José Limón and then returned to Juilliard to teach, said that by the time students graduate, they will have learned not only ballet and contemporary work, but also the techniques of Limón, Martha Graham, Merce Cunningham, and Lester Horton. That's how you build a dancer today who can go out into the world, Steinberg said. All those pieces on the chessboard. The stress on versatility also reflects the way most dance companies function today. Dancers are expected to be conversant in many techniques. Melissa Toogood, Juilliard's dean and director of dance, said, "Contemporary companies have ballet classes, and ballet companies are commissioning contemporary and modern work." Hill had studied both ballet and modern dance before beginning her career as a member of Graham's company. In 1934, she founded the Bennington School of the Dance, a summer program where modern dance pioneers like Graham, Doris Humphrey, Charles Weidman, Hanya Holm, and Limón taught and created dances. It is now recognized as having been one of the most important incubators of American modern dance. Hill invited these and other leading figures in modern dance, like Donald McCall and Anna Sokolow, to join the faculty at Juilliard, working side by side with ballet luminaries, including the choreographer Anthony Tudor. For artists in the eternally financially strained dance field, Juilliard became an anchor and a place to create. For the students, it was an opportunity to learn from some of the biggest names in their field. These big names did not always get along. The choreographer Pina Bausch, who spent a year as an exchange student from Germany in the late 50s, once recalled that Tudor and Limón, eminences in different realms, ignored each other, two kings who passed each other without looking. It is not surprising, given the larger-than-life personas of the people who circulated the hallways. In her book about dancing for Merce Cunningham, Chance and Circumstance, Carolyn Brown, who attended in 1952 to 1953, described Martha Graham, an infrequent presence in the studios. A member of her company usually taught her class, as a sorceress wielding magic powers over her subjects. Other faculty members were less theatrical, if still inspiring. The choreographer Robert Battle, who attended in the early 90s, found a mentor in Carolyn Adams, who had spent several years as the only black dancer in the Paul Taylor Dance Company. Adams joined the Juilliard faculty in 1982. When he first arrived, Battle felt out of place, he said in an interview. Then he took a class with Adams. There was something about the way she distilled information about movement, about a gesture, about dance, that was so compelling to me, he said. It took me to another spiritual place, a place of belonging. Battle went on to found a company, then became director of Alvin Ailey, where he introduced Paul Taylor's works into the repertory. He's now a choreographer in residence at the Paul Taylor Dance Company. As he put it, it's all part of the continuum. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In many cases, the students turned out to be as remarkable as their teachers. The list of alumni includes Taylor and Bausch, both of whom went on to create important dance companies, the famed Alvin Ailey dancer Dudley Williams, and Sylvia Waters, who danced for Ailey before becoming artistic director of its second company. A significant number became major choreographers, including Lar Lubavitch, Martha Clark, Ohad Naharin, Robert Garland, Jessica Lange, Bobby Jean Smith, and Shamel Pitts. As the profession has evolved, so has Juilliard. Alicia Graf Mack, who directed the dance division from 2018 until 2025, when she left to become the artistic director of Alvin Ailey, made adjustments to the curriculum meant to reflect the greater diversity of dance today, requiring West African dance and hip hop and allowing dancers of any gender to take point classes. A lot of what she did was informed by where the field is now, she said in a phone interview. We wanted to create an environment that allows each dancer to thrive in their unique identity, and that they would be encouraged also to pursue different paths upon graduation. As solid as the program appears today, the future of dance at Juilliard was not always assured. The most difficult period was the mid-60s, when Juilliard was invited to be part of the new arts complex that would become Lincoln Center. It was a big step up for Juilliard, but it soon became clear that the dance department might not survive the move. Juilliard's director at the time, Peter Menon, a composer, quietly began making arrangements to allow the School of American Ballet, the training arm of New York City Ballet, to take over dance education at Lincoln Center. The school had the glamour of being led by the superstar choreographer George Balanchine and his right-hand man, Lincoln Kirstein, as well as being the recipient of a large grant from the Ford Foundation. This plan would have meant the end of dance as a division of Juilliard and would have given up on modern dance training altogether. It felt like the idea of modern dance was insignificant, and we were insignificant, Steinberg said. She spearheaded a letter campaign to save the department. The struggle to save dance at Juilliard lasted years. In the end, it survived, even if it was made to share its new quarters, a hulking building of travertine and glass facing West 65th Street, with the School of American Ballet, which got 4 dance studios to Juilliard's 2. The two programs share the 3rd floor, separated by a glass door. At one point, a typewritten note posted on the Juilliard side read, "The glass doors are to be kept locked at all times." This uneasy coexistence continued until 1990, when a new high-rise was built just west of Juilliard on the same block. It now houses both the School of American Ballet and dorms for both institutions. Some things haven't changed at Juilliard. Students still take classes in anatomy, stagecraft, acting, dance history, music, and liberal arts. Most performances are accompanied by live music played by Juilliard musicians. And perhaps most importantly, the school continues to stress creation. Students are required to take 2 years of composition classes where they learn the basics of how to put together a dance. In their 3rd year, dancers can apply to participate in a class in which they are paired with a Juilliard composer to make a piece. The dance field has broadened dramatically since 1951, and with it, the demands of a dance education. Meeting the profession where it is today is often a balancing act. My concern, Mack said of her tenure, was always for the dancers to build their toolbox and to strengthen their bodies so that they become the most fluent vessel to express themselves. It's easy to think that Martha Hill would have approved. Film, mixing politics with laughs. Premarital sex is banned on the rom-com One Night Only by Ashley Spencer. Boy meets girl. They banter. They gallivant around New York City. They're trying to find love under the thumb of totalitarian oppression. That's the setup of the new romantic comedy One Night Only, now in theater. Directed by Will Gluck, Anyone But You and Easy A, the film is set in a version of the city that looks nearly identical to reality with one twist. Premarital sex is illegal, except for the one night each year when unmarried people are allowed to copulate at will. In the movie's elaborate world building, the law is the result of a conservative United States government, and it is enforced through biosensors, though there is active resistance. Against this backdrop, the hopeless romantic Allie, Monica Barbaro, and the recently jilted Owen, Callum Turner, keep getting thrown together via a series of chaotic events. To get a sense of the film he was hoping to make, Gluck asked Barbaro to watch Uncut Gems, After Hours, and Midnight Run, films with tight timelines and escalating stakes. I was like, okay, there's not a single rom-com, but I know you're the rom-com guy, said the actress, whose turn as Joan Baez in A Complete Unknown earned her an Oscar nomination. She continued, "It felt odd, but it felt exciting." For Turner, a British actor best known for his work in dramatic fare like The Boys in the Boat and Masters of the Air, the film allowed him to tap into a sillier side. "I loved how absurd it was," he said. "I've always wanted to do an out-and-out rom-com. I did Eternity, but it was more of a grounded performance, and this character is a goofball." Off-screen, the actors, both 36, have their own romances. Turner married the singer Dua Lipa in June, and Barbaro has been linked to her artificial co-star, Andrew Garfield. In a joint interview in July, the stars discussed One Night Only, their New York memories, and their views on love. These are edited excerpts from their conversation. "This is a rom-com that is explicitly political. The whole premise of the movie hinges on that. How did you feel about that through line?" Monica Barbaro: "While it does have that political undertone, ultimately, I think the movie is really just an allegory for dating. You can be living with a government you don't agree with, but at the end of the day, you still just want to find love. And maybe it means having to exist alongside a lot of discomfort and hardship." Callum Turner: "You know, the movie is about love. Ultimately, it's not about anything political. For me, I never paid attention to that. What I really liked actually was that it's not a dystopian future. It's a New York that we recognize just with a slight twist. It's also an absurd idea that the government made people not have sex." Barbaro: "Well, some people feel like it's absurd, and some people are like, that could happen. That's the interesting thing." Do you think it's absurd or something that could happen? Turner: "I think it's an absurd idea. That's the point, right? It's actually so far from our reality that we can then, as an audience, put ourselves in that situation. You're like, well, what would I do if I had this one night? Would I marry early? Would I hold out?" Barbaro: "I think the biosensors would never fly, but I actually am at a point where I have no idea. I think we're well past absurdity in a lot of ways right now. I'm constantly shocked by what I read in the news, so who knows?" Your characters take digs at each other's physical traits. Allie tells Owen, "Your ears are like car doors." Owen tells Allie, "Your nose is way too small for your face." How did you come up with those? Turner: "Monica improvised those lines. I couldn't believe it." Barbaro: "I was like, I've got more." Turner: "Monica and Will have an obsession with my ears, which is where that joke came from. When I was younger, everyone used to take the mick out of my ears because I think I was born with the size that I have now, and then my head grew into them." Will Gluck is known for musical moments in his rom-coms. Here, Allie is a singer who records pop covers for pharmaceutical ads. What were the conversations like around the songs? Barbaro: "I got to work with the same vocal coach that I worked with on A Complete Unknown, but obviously for that, I was hell-bent on honoring the artist that I was playing. In this, I was still anxious about the quality of work, but when I was singing the psoriasis song, we just kept bursting out laughing. Esty Haim, a composer on the film, was really helpful in getting me to embrace the emotional heights of these songs. Then it just becomes that much funnier." Callum, were you familiar with the concept of pharmaceutical jingles? Direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical advertising is banned in most other countries. Turner: "No, I didn't really understand it at the beginning. I'm aware of the commercials, but not the jingles." Barbaro: "I do wonder if it'll make sense to people abroad." Turner: "I mean, I still haven't heard a pharmaceutical jingle in real life. Yours are the only ones I know. Psoriasis, say what you want to say and let your clear skin out. I'm not a singer. Barbaro, that's what I used to say. This is a very New York movie. The city is almost another character in the film. Do you remember the first time you visited? Barbaro, I was 12 and it was a class trip to New York and DC. I remember being enamored with it. Then I went a year later with my mom and my brother, and we walked by NYU, and I was like, I want to go there. I did end up going to NYU, and it was a dream come true. I had no interest in being a kid on campus with a football team. Turner, I was 10. I came with my mom and her friend in that period between Christmas and New Year's Eve. It was snowing and cold, and we stayed north of Times Square. I just remember it was like the movies. It was magic. We went ice skating in Central Park. Everything's bigger and louder and brighter. I was really just in awe of it. Barbaro, that's how I felt about London, to be honest. I was like, this is nothing like America. This is so cool. Turner, I also remember being in the hotel room and watching America's Most Wanted. I was like, what the hell is this? In England, we had Crime Watch. Crime Watch would be like, a badger was stolen from his den. We have to find the culprit. America's Most Wanted was like 6-time murderer. What classic rom-coms have you rewatched the most? Turner, I know Monica's 10 Things I Hate About You, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, and My Best Friend's Wedding. Barbaro, well done. Yours is Notting Hill. Turner, yeah, I have in the past been on the way out of the house and ended up sitting on the sofa and watching the whole thing instead. Do you believe in the idea of soulmates? Turner, I do, definitely. I believe there are so many different types of love. There's the slow burn, there's friendships, there's parents. Soulmates doesn't have to be a partnership. It could be anything. Some of my soulmates are my best friends. Barbaro, I agree with that. There are also so many ways into love and lasting relationships, but I do think there's a special karmic something to certain relationships. In the film, Allie is concerned with finding something real amid the chaos. Being in the public eye, how do you make sure you're able to have a real friend relationship in spite of all the noise? Turner, it's like everything else. It's a very normal relationship. It's the truth. Barbaro, it is ultimately a very normal relationship and protecting privacy as much as possible in order not to open up to, protecting privacy is a big part of it. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Television, keeping it real no matter how rad. Lanterns looks to foster a buddy cop feel for its comic book adaptation by Matt Stevens. For many months, people eager for information about the new HBO series Lanterns had a single production still they could inspect. Many obsessed over the green ring peeking out from the actor Kyle Chandler's middle finger. What hints might it hold? Somebody did a 20-minute YouTube video zooming in on this ring, Jeffrey Johnson, the show's property master, recalled last year on a Warner Brothers soundstage in Burbank, California. He slid the ring into the show's meticulously crafted lantern. The level of scrutiny, he added, is fascinating. Johnson knew the ring would be a big thing, and the people involved with this ambitious Green Lantern drama are hoping it will be too. It is the next major undertaking from DC Studios, coming on the heels of James Gunn's Superman movie, which won wide acclaim last summer, and Craig Gillespie's Supergirl, which flopped this summer. Now the pressure is on the creators of Lanterns, which premieres on Sunday, to turn things back around. I think of Sunday night HBO, said the showrunner Chris Mundy, Ozark, True Detective, Night Country, who created Lanterns with Damon Lindelof, Lost, and The Leftovers, and the comic book writer Tom King. Even just hearing that whole thing when the HBO sign comes on, it's kind of a terrifying challenge because it needs to live up to that little crackle. What the art department tried to do with the ring, wrap a thing that can unleash all this power inside a relatively pedestrian package, as the production designer John Pano described it, is a reasonably good encapsulation of what the creators want to do with the show. That vision became clearer during 2 days on set in June 2025 when I spoke with about a dozen people involved with the production, and in conversations with cast and crew members since. As the writers put it, sure, it's a series about intergalactic superheroes, but they wanted Lanterns to be firmly grounded on Earth, more tactile and true detective, Mundy said, than the usual comic book adaptation, more sweaty and grimy than glowing and green screen. It's an approach that HBO has used to great success in adapting DC properties before, recently with the gritty, noir-inflected drama The Penguin, which won 9 Emmys like hair, prosthetics, and costumes. Lindelof's 2019 HBO adaptation of Watchmen was similarly rooted in DC Comics lore, while taking place in a world that felt all too real. It, too, collected several Emmys, winning 11. Our central objective going into this was to take this canon that has all these sorts of spectacular things and keeping the spectacular, Mundy said later on a video call, but also making sure it's relatable. The historic Warner Brothers lot was the hub of Lanterns. On the afternoon I visited, more than 80 people were hard at work on the production. Between takes, crew members raced to thread cables through doorways, adjust lights in the kitchen, and push cameras on massive dollies. The pleasant smell of freshly planted jasmine wafted through the air. For all its superhero underpinnings, Lanterns is at base a buddy cop show. The buddies, or in this case, co-workers, frenemies, just happens to be space cops known as Green Lanterns. There are a bunch of them, with supernatural powers derived from the ring. Yes, there is also an actual Green Lantern, effectively a fancy charging station for the ring. Set mostly along 2 timelines, one in 2016 and the other in 2026, the series follows an older Lantern, Hal Jordan, played by Kyle Chandler, and a new Lantern recruit, John Stewart, Aaron Pierre, one of DC's first black superheroes when he was introduced in the early 70s. Each timeline turns on a central mystery, though Mundy argued that the relationship between Hal and John is what drives the show. Hal is brash, arrogant, and impulsive. He knows everything and he's never wrong, Chandler said during an interview inside one of the Burbank production offices. And he has no problem telling people that he's never wrong and that they're always wrong. So it's a fun character because he gets to evolve from there. John is to some degree Hal's opposite, dutiful, driven, and poised. A former Marine sniper and an architect, John embodies 2 seemingly juxtaposed things coexisting in one individual, Pierre said. When the series opens, Hal and John are investigating a murder in Rushville, Nebraska. The 2 men are supposed to work together, but they are very much in each other's way. King, the comic book writer and co-creator of the series, credited Chandler and Pierre for embodying the epitome of who Hal and John are in the comics. In a costuming trailer, a mood board for Hal included a picture of Anthony Bourdain. One for John included Mahershala Ali in True Detective. Yet the writers also sought to stretch these characters to their limits, King said. So many details seemed geared toward keeping Lanterns a show in which characters fight aliens and can fly as earthbound as possible. Hal's suit, for instance, stood in the corner of the costuming trailer, looking more battle-tested than high-tech. Sci-fi futuristic was something that we were trying to definitely dial back, said Cynthia Ann Summers, the costume designer. It took 20 tries before everyone settled on a design for the lantern, Johnson, the prop master, said. It lights up in 4 directions, but it is also weathered and worn. It's been around for generations, Johnson said. It's traveled. That lived-in quality infused the set designs as well. On stage 19, designers had built the Stewart family home, whose patio ceiling was flecked with dirt and grime. A big carton of goldfish crackers sat atop the refrigerator. On the wall hung family pictures, and on the windows, floral curtains that had seen much better days. The house was tidy. Mrs. Stewart, John's mother, is house proud, said the set director, Amy Wells, but not too tidy. Mrs. Stewart has 3 boys. Would she have a white sofa? Wells said of Mrs. Stewart. Absolutely not. The hardest thing to do for my job, Wells added, is to get it to be real. A few days after visiting Burbank, I drove 40 miles northwest to a flat, unincorporated town called Piru, where the production was filming scenes set in Rushville. When Piru was selected as a Nebraska stand-in, everyone knew the imposing mountains abutting the town would need to be removed in post-production. Otherwise, the place felt perfect. Rushville, in real life a city of fewer than 1,000 people, is the domain and lanterns of Sheriff Carey, Kelly McDonald. As McDonald had said while stopping by a production office on the Warner Brothers lot, that means a total of 3 cops are all patrolling the very small town, and they're all sort of butting heads at various points. Sheriff Carey just wants them gone, she said of Hal and John, and the more she wants them gone, the more Hal Jordan knows that there's something to stay for. For some months, Piru's main street became downtown Rushville. King's father is from Rushville, and Mundy, the showrunner, is from Nebraska. Knock on the brick facade of Sheriff Carey's Sheridan County Sheriff's Office, and you would have discovered it was hollow. But knock on the wall of Rush Valley Coffee a few steps away, and you would have hurt your hand. It is an actual business called Corazon de Piru that was being used to house the wardrobe department. On the day I visited, cast and crew were filming a scene inside a diner they built, which hosts several important meetings during the series. The roadside place advertising itself with orange block letters spelling CAFE. As crew members prepared lights inside, food stylists out back put the finishing touches on half-eaten blueberry pancakes. Although it is part of the broader DC universe, Lanterns is a freestanding story, Mundy said. It was also conceived as a multi-season show. Green Lanterns, after all, can get pulled into all kinds of jobs in all kinds of places. We're trying to really put Jon Stewart on his feet inside our own show, but then once he's on his feet, he can walk around in the rest of the DC-verse, Mundy said. As the 2026 mystery unfolds, another Green Lantern, Guy Gardner, will make a cameo, offering a bit of connective tissue to the Superman movie. But we had no directives, Mundy added, to make it fit with some other show or movie. That gave the creators a lot of freedom compared with some other franchises, where writers can be hemmed in by maddeningly Byzantine lore. But with that freedom comes pressure, as with the outside fan attention to that early image of the Ring. King hinted at a major plot twist and a break with canon, both of which could prove controversial. Lindelof acknowledged a real fear of screwing it up, emphasizing that the thing that matters to me the most was the fans could feel how much we cared about Hal and John. But as Lindelof also noted, Lanterns is a show with 2 protagonists who are fixated on the idea that one can abolish fear. No one is going to want to watch a scaredy cat version of the show, he said. This story, their version of it at least, has to have risk embedded in it. If it doesn't, Lindelof added, it's going to fall flat on its face. The Q. I'm the Mid-Atlantic Bureau Chief for The Times, covering 7 states and the city of Washington. There's a lot of news these days, and much of it seems pretty bonkers, so I welcome a little perspective. Here are 5 things I've read, looked at, and listened to lately, by Campbell Robertson. Max Elvanka Murals, Art. One of my favorite buildings is the region I cover is St. Nicholas Croatian Catholic Church in Pittsburgh. The walls and ceilings are covered with surreal murals painted by Maxo Vanka, a Croatian immigrant in the 1930s and 40s. They blend religious imagery with the hard lives and deaths of soldiers, miners, and immigrants. Saxophone Colossus, albums. Sonny Rollins put on one of the best concerts I've ever been to. After he died in May, I started listening to his breakout album again. With Max Roach on drums, every track is a groove, bluesy and urbane, music to solve crimes by. R.I.P. Masters of Atlantis, books. I'd read most of Charles Portis's work, The Dog of the South is my go-to, but came late to this novel about charlatans, hustlers, and esoteric cults. Like most of Portis's books, Masters of Atlantis is a deadpan portrait of earnest cranks, and it is hilarious. It is also, at our current moment, uncannily familiar. Anthropium, games. I was recently turned on to this online game where you have to guess the date and geographical origin of items in the Metropolitan Museum of Art's collection. It is an enjoyable way to explore the sheer breadth and depth of my ignorance. Tudor Monastery Farm, television. In this house, we watch and rewatch this BBC Historical Farm series. Each season focuses on a different era, with 3 historians performing the daily duties of ordinary people from that time period in rural England. The real counterculture in the Doomscroll era is watching a couple of academics try to build a pig pen. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the August 16th issue of the New York Times Arts and Leisure section. We read from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section every Sunday at 3 p.m. Your reader has been Kathy. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the re-airing of this morning's Buffalo News. Following that at 6 p.m. is the Buffalo News Viewpoints. Stay tuned for this reading and more throughout the day. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability